So I've talked before about the multi-level marketing scheme that is the right and that is conservatism. So it's a lot like Tupperware or Mary Kay or doTERRA or whatever. These it's a product that might very well be high quality and good. And it's not sold at a store, either digitally or physically. It's sold through friendships in a way. And those friendships are called down channels, downstreams. And what happens is it is a pyramid scheme in effect. Although it's not quite as elaborate as a pyramid scheme as Bernie Madoff, where he was literally paying people out with the new revenue that was coming in and not really investing anything. It was a house of mirrors. It's not a pyramid scheme in the sense of, I remember back in the 90s, there was something where it was like women helping women. And so I think you get two friends to give you each $1,000, and then they'll get two friends to give $1,000 to them, like women helping women. That's just a direct pyramid scheme. Obviously, the first person is benefiting because the first person doesn't give anyone any money. And at some point, you're going to run out of people. So it's just ultimately not sustainable, and it's going to collapse, and it's going to create heartache, et cetera. But an MLM structure, there's the top, there's the center, you could say. And that center is the GOP, but it probably is Trump and MAGA. But I think Trump's above MAGA. MAGA is a subset of Trump, and maybe even the GOP is a subset of MAGA at this point. And you have all these different down channels, downstreams, where you're basically selling Trump to different audiences. So if this is Tupperware, Susie in Oklahoma is going to make a different pitch than Sally, who lives in Seattle, Washington, or Jennifer, who lives in New York City. They have different sets of friends. They're mutually exclusive. And they're going to talk about the benefits of Tupperware in different ways for those different audiences. But the money flows up to Tupperware HQ. And Sally in Seattle, I believe is where she was, or was she from Oklahoma? I forgot. Sally from Seattle, she's going to sell Tupperware to friends, and then that friend is going to start creating a different down channel. Maybe that down channel will be bigger than Sally's. Probably will be smaller. And so the money is going to flow to Sally, and then it's going to flow to Tupperware, and Sally gets a little cut of it. It's an MLM scheme. These are somehow legal. They're very popular in Utah and among Mormons for some reason that I don't quite know. They're just friendly, I guess. And that this is a better way of doing it as opposed to the kind of objective, cold reality of just buying something or negotiating or something. It's about friendship and mission. Maybe that's why it appeals to Mormons. Who knows? But the right is an MLM, and you have different down channels. So there's the Tucker downstream. There's the Fox News downstream. There is the Daily Wire downstream. And there's even the Nick Fuentes downstream, where Nick Fuentes is racialist, at least off and on. He's a Catholic. He's a Christian nationalist. He is anti-Zionist, maybe anti-Semitic. I'm not trying to tar and feather anyone. I'm just, pointing out the realities of this. His downstream probably doesn't have any crossover with the Daily Wire's downstream. Maybe a little bit. His probably has a lot of crossover with Tucker's downstream. But the thing is, they're all going up to Trump. Trump is benefiting from this in some way, as is the GOP and as is MAGA writ large. So Nick took a very interesting turn after the
Oh
assassination
yeah,
attempt
yeah.
on Trump. Mute guys. Yeah, I'll mute these. He took an interesting turn after the assassination attempt, and it was really after uh, Vance was appointed the VP, which happened shortly after, right before the Republican National Convention, and it was maybe Trump should lose. Don't vote for Trump. Now, I would imagine a ton of groypers, to the degree to which they're old enough to vote, did vote for Trump. And at the very least, were rooting for Trump and probably tweeted a lot in favor of Trump. But at least from the top, it was no, Trump is not our guy. We're suspicious of JD Vance. He's pro Israel. Now, he didn't do what I did, which is just outright say vote for Kamala Harris, but it was a sort of negative reaction. It was a kind of independence move from the MLM structure. And maybe you could say the money would flow to Nick, not to MAGA. I don't think it actually happened that way. I think Nick remained a downstream channel of Trump and MAGA to some degree, but it was a move towards independence. Absolutely give him that. And you could say that the quote generational run of going on all these podcasts, Patrick Ben David, is furthering Nick's independence because he is introducing himself to these audiences. He's grafting a little bit of legitimacy from these people. I mean, Patrick Ben David interviewed Netanyahu and Donald Trump, I'm sure, and JD Vance. So he also interviewed Nick Fuentes. So he's grafting a little bit of legitimacy from that. But it's all towards the independence. Well, my fear, and again, this is entirely coming from my perspective. It's not Nick's perspective. He can take this criticism or leave it. It's up to him. My fear is that doing something like going on with Tucker Carlson, you're just creating a new downstream channel from MAGA and Trump, period. And a lot of those criticisms of MAGA and Trump that you made 6 or a year ago are now sort of moot at best, if not negated. And Tucker, he'll vaguely talk about 9/11, almost playing footsie under the table with 9/11 conspiracy theorists, although not exactly. He'll just sort of flirt with that. He'll be like, oh, the Pharisees, they just said, let's just kill Jesus. And that's what the liberals did, or maybe the Jews did to Charlie Kirk. He's sort of indicating these things without fully saying them. Now, you could say that this is the amazing art of parataxis, I believe is what it is, or the amazing art of writing under persecution, of subliminal messaging, and so on. Or you could say he's afraid of his own convictions, or he can't articulate himself. Both might be true, or a mix of both might be true. But he flirts with anti-Semitism. He calls out the neocons in all these different ways, often, even though the neocons are no longer in power. And that seems to be a sort of proxy for Jews as well. So he plays with the race stuff. He was doing that at Fox News. He plays with the Jew stuff. He plays with the Zionism stuff. And isn't this amazing? One thing I would just say is that to think that Tucker Carlson is not a downstream channel of Donald Trump is entirely naive. He is 100% sending 100% of his audience to go vote for Trump and to maybe give Trump money. Now, he might say all this stuff about the neocons taking over the GOP, or, our government just hates us, they hate Christians. Or he might say all this stuff, but I'm sorry, he is not an independent actor. He is an independent media personality, but that does not mean he's an independent actor. And if you think otherwise, I would just simply say, I think you're being naive, and I strongly disagree with you. That is a tentacle of the Trump MLM structure. Alex Jones is as well. Alex Jones is another down channel of MAGA. He wasn't always like that. He was a down channel of the Ron Paul movement in 2008 and 2012. He was, you could say, a totally independent actor who said both sides are controlled by the same entities. The two parties are two wings of a bird of prey. There's not a dime's worth of difference between Republicans and Democrats. He might have said things like that 20 years ago and was genuinely independent, even if his audience was probably 70 or 80% right wing. But he's not that anymore. And even if he talks about aliens, either reptile shapeshifters or first contact gray beings who landed in Nevada, or whatever he wants to talk about, he still is pushing money, influence, attention, energy, votes up the channel towards doTERRA, or in this case, Trump, towards Tupperware or Amway or whatever the hell. It is an MLM structure. So there's sort of a good and bad side to Nick being buddy-buddy with Tucker Carlson. Because Nick Fuentes, you could say, would be just like the kind of young version of Alex Jones. Different. Alex Jones is Texan. He's Protestant. He's, was reared in Ron Paulism and the gold standard. It's different. There's no doubt. Nick, from Chicago, Illinois, he's Catholic. He's more kind of liberal nationalist, you could say, on policy, whatever. But it's sort of a new version of this same outsider who's not actually an outsider. And there's actually someone on here right now that I was talking to, and I said, like, here's the tell with all this stuff, is that if Nick basically comes around to JD Vance, I think that will be a tell, because that was a very strong position he took, a bold and brave position, and it's a position that goes against everyone else's position who's roughly his age. Because I think actually the young people at TPUSA and the dissident right, Sovereign House, Teal sphere, they like Vance for reasons I cannot explain. But they like him. And he bucked that trend, and it's just sort of a signal. Now, what have I heard? And we can get into it listening to the interview. And I haven't listened to the full thing. I've just seen clips. I might be surprised and change my mind. Fair enough. But I did hear things like in this interview and previous interviews, like, why do they want to kill us? Well, they want to kill. I won't imitate Nick. The liberals want to kill us. Now, Nick, of course, his position here is totally defensible, because a liberal, or at least someone suffering from debilitating schizophrenia, did literally try to kill him. So I will actually give him a pass on that kind of outrageous sentiment. There was a crazy person who went to his house, and was eventually killed by police, if I remember correctly. So anyway, a man who is totally out of his mind, and that is dangerous, and that changes you. To be fair to the liberal woman who came to his house who got pepper sprayed, I doubt she wanted to kill Nick. I will, just to be fair here. But it's still, nevertheless, scary when someone comes to your house. They're sort of invading your space. Can you trust them, etc.? So I'll give him a little bit of a pass on this sentiment. But that whole idea of the liberals want to castrate or trans your children, the liberals are going to just start shooting everyone, every conservative, beginning with Charlie Kirk, and so on. Yeah, you can find some people who might even say these things, whether they'll act on it. But what I'm looking at is, even if there's some truth to it, and I'm granting some truth to it, the pathology remains. The pathology is, this is the most important election of our lifetime. We have to put differences aside and just vote the GOP, or we'll all be dead, or our kids will be transed, the national debt will explode, we'll go to war. It's that type of reasoning that I would really push back on in a number of different ways. First off, I think we're going to war. We've already gone to war in effect with Trump. And I think I'm 80% certain that something is going to happen in Venezuela, in fact. So, yeah, he's going to take us to war. The trans stuff, he's pushed back on it in the second term. The trans stuff accelerated, amplified itself in his first term. It's a kind of a mixed bag. Whether Trump really ended the trans stuff, or whether the trans stuff was burning out anyway because it was becoming illegitimate among like New York Times readers and average liberals, it's a complicated phenomenon. But I'm granting some truth value to all these things. I don't think these people are totally wrong when they say, if we don't vote for the GOP, we're going to be literally dead. All I'm pointing out is that type of reasoning, that pathology of reasoning. People were saying this exact same thing in 2010. They were saying it in 2004. They were saying it in 2000. They were saying it in 1996. I mean, even when Bill Clinton got elected. I've heard this throughout my entire life. And at the the GOP has put up zero resistance to all of these things that they worry about. And in many ways, the GOP has itself been the vehicle for many of these bad things. So does Nick want to become another down channel of Trump? It could be more profitable. It could be more exciting. Could have more influence. Fair enough. He doesn't owe me anything. He can take my criticism and leave it or listen to it. It's up to him. Does he want to be an independent entity, or does he want to be a kind of colorful character who's barely tolerated by MAGA? Because that's what he looks like now. Well, you're just a cute kid, aren't you? You're so funny. You agree that porn is bad. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Liberals also say that, by the way. But anyway, I don't need to nitpick all of these positions. And it's like what Tucker does with Alex Jones. How are you so right? Alex Jones, he's so authentic. He's just a real dude. It's the same thing they do. It's this thing. It's a colorful, clownish entity that they barely tolerate that is ultimately maybe their downstream channel, but definitely a downstream channel to MAGA. And that's what I think is happening. I'm not pleased with it. Now, whether Nick is pleased with it, that's up to him. Nick also came from the mainstream much more than I did. I was barely in mainstream conservatism when I was perhaps at the American Conservative Magazine, but not even then. I mean, the American Conservative Magazine was verboten in many ways. It was absolutely anti-war, and Pat Buchanan was denounced as a racist by Bill Buckley in the 90s and then David Frum in the 2000s, etc. I was not reared in the conservative movement, even if my family was broadly Republican. I was, I don't know. I was the guy buying Richard Dawkins books at Barnes and Noble in 2005. I was not the guy buying George W. Bush's autobiography. So it's just, I had a different path. Um, James Ambrose, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just gonna like make the mention that like what you're describing is like these outrider groups like playing this Mott and Bailey game of like, oh, I understand you're a racialist, but here's an appeal to that comes back to Trump. Or I understand you're a libertarian and here's an outrider group to that in but we all like bring our like uh pet project back to this
Yes.
main
You can be a UFO
conglomerate.
theorist and they will
Right.
barely tolerate you if you're going to Trump. Like you can bring that pet theory. You can bring Catholicism. You can bring even racism. I mean,
Right.
don't you think that Jared Taylor is ultimately, gotta get do not disturb on there. Jared Taylor is ultimately a downstream channel of the GOP, if one that is a lot smaller or at the very least less influential than Nick Fuentes. In the sense that I remember this just vividly, and it sort of explained a lot to me, which was this speech he gave actually to a private gathering. It was probably in 2010 or something like this. And he said, why don't liberals get race? Why don't liberals get race? And he went through just a litany of why liberals are so naive about IQ differences or something. And none of it was wrong exactly, but I felt that it was, first off, highly insufficient to explain why liberals don't get race. But it also seems to be begging the question of why don't conservatives get race?
Right.
Why do
Liberals
they
understand.
believe in the exact same things? Why are you attacking like Democrats for this problem? And also, are you not able to sort of think a little bit dialectically? Like, isn't it weird that liberals, in fact, get race in the sense that they're the ones at the forefront, at the very least? Conservatives tag along, but they're the ones at the forefront of racial transformation in the workplace and academia and the school. Like, race is realer for a liberal than it is for Alex Jones, who's like, oh, race doesn't exist. We're just all Americans. Well, I stand for all humanity against the globalist.
Right. Liberals actually don't engage in egalitarianism. They say that these people need like a leg up,
Yeah,
which is to acknowledge race.
yeah.
They
And
just
also,
understand how to
like,
integrate it to their ends.
yeah, exactly. And also like in kowtowing to some degree or like literally or figuratively washing the feet of a black person, you are internally transformed. So race must be real. Now, they might very well not like Richard Lynn and say, oh, that's pseudoscience or what. Sure. But that's kind of like a minor aspect of the race thing, really. And important, but dis- an important but insufficient and maybe even dispensable aspect of the race question, just like IQ charts. So again, my question was like, why aren't you trying to reform your own side? Like, why don't you talk about why conservatives don't get race and like work on them? Why is it like attacking Hillary Clinton? Because no one in the audience, or at least his assumed audience, I was there, but his assumed audience is going to disagree with everything. You're just preaching to the choir. And you're basically giving people warm and fuzzy feelings about voting for the GOP is somehow based